It is like but crack of dawn here on Monday. And I'm in my bedroom because my daughter fell asleep out in the living room. So, yeah, her blood sugars were wonky. So she came out to the living room and fell asleep on the couch. So, I don't want to wake her up. So, I'm in my bedroom. As I was trying to decide kind of what to do for my life Monday, today, and I've been thinking about it for a few days, and nothing was really coming to me. And then so I like to watch other people's YouTube channels, and I get inspired by other people's YouTube channels a lot. And so, I don't, in my videos, I try to be upbeat. I try to make it fun. I try to be at a place that's like, that if you're having a bad day, and it could make you have a better day. And I've had people comment and been like, oh my gosh, I had the hardest day at work. Came home, watched one of your like Whip It Wednesdays, and it just made it all better. And so those kind of comments really help because I feel like I'm doing my job if I'm helping somebody have a better day. And in life, that is kind of my attitude about things. I really try to be upbeat and positive for the most part, like as much as I can. And even when I go through something really hard, I try to be like, look at it on the like positive side, like what could this possibly turn into? Because sometimes during the time you're going through something, it sucks. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It sucks. Because life is hard. But like when you look back on some of those things that really sucked or that were really hard at the time, and you're like, wow, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here in my life. Like this wouldn't have happened or that wouldn't have happened. And that's kind of how I try to remember things, because yeah, there are things that really suck that have really like been hard for me to go through, but then they get me to a place that I am now. You know what I mean? For instance, one of the jobs that I had was just working because I'm an at-home mom, and I got asked if I wanted to do some of the grounds work here at the apartment complex. This was a few years ago. And I was like, absolutely, yeah, that'd be great. And so I did that for quite a while, for a few years. Anyways, we got a new guy on that was going to be, taking over as my boss. He was horrible, horrible. So much so I ended up quitting, but it was a really like rough time with him. He was very like, what do you call it? Sexist? Very sexist. I was a woman, so I was underneath him no matter what position, like our positions were at work, like I was a woman. And so that was a struggle for me. But anyways, my voice is dying. Um, anyways, that was really hard at the time going through that. And I was like, I kind of don't know what to do. We needed the money. And so I kind of toughed it out. Well, we had just started doing dog training and for Maya. And it maybe by, I don't know, 4 months into it, maybe if that. And we had what was called, what was that called? Oh Lord, what was that called? When we went out on the town with the doggies. I don't remember what we called it. But anyways, basically we would take our dogs into a public setting, somewhere that allowed dogs, but into a public setting, and do training with our trainer. Well, there was at one point like that I was the only one going to go, and so my trainer was like, hey, let's go to Costco, because our dog was a service dog in training. So we're like, oh yeah, let's go to Costco. So we went to Costco, and it was just us, and so we were talking and stuff as we were doing the training and going through the store. And she learned that like, I was having a really hard time at my work, and I was, thinking about maybe quitting and doing something else. And so at the end of that shopping trip, she's like, want to come work for me? And I was like, what? She's like, yeah. She's like, I'll train you, and you'll be my assistant trainer, and yeah, you want to work for me? And I was like, yeah. She's an awesome person. Her name is Stephanie. Anyway, so she hired me, like, and I was like, it was amazing. And so looking back, like, on that situation, um, if I hadn't have gone through what I went through with that boss of mine, I wouldn't have ever got into dog training. And that is a passion of mine. Like, as many of you know, I am very into dogs and I am very into training. Like, I love training dogs. I love it. And I wouldn't have had Lincoln if that wouldn't have happened either. Because through work, through training, through all of that stuff, I met Lincoln. We brought Lincoln in that summer we were using him and his sister, they were puppies, to make videos for like a puppy training class thing. Anyway, so I wouldn't have met Lincoln if that hadn't happened. And or I would have met him because I knew him, but I would not have like fell in love with him the way I did, and we wouldn't have brought him home. Like, he would not be a part of our family if I hadn't have gone through some of those things that I went through. And so while going through those hard times, I really tried to have like that positive outlook on what could this become. And sometimes that is hard. Like, it is really hard to think of the future of like, well, okay, this sucks butt right now, like really bad. But in the future, maybe I look back and say, this wouldn't have happened if, you know what I'm saying? And so, I have gone through a lot of hard things. And, during those times, there was times before I really got that grasp on life, like that, okay, this sucks, but this could change and turn into something good. I hadn't learned that yet. I really hadn't like come to terms with that, I guess. And yeah, so it has molded me into the person I am. But when me and my husband first got married, we were only married for 3 months. When we got pregnant with my son, and we were super thrilled. Like, we both wanted kids like early on. It wasn't like a oh my gosh type thing, you know. We were both really happy. um and we were both really excited about that. um anyway, so I my pregnancy wasn't horrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. And I was high risk for many reasons, from a lot of my health issues. Anyways, I ended up going into labor with him really early, like at 30 weeks. Was in the hospital with him, I don't even know how many times, stopping labor, all that stuff. But I ended up with a very healthy boy, at the end. Like, we made it to where he was only 2.5 weeks early, and came out happy, healthy, and amazing. He was an amazing baby, especially for a first baby. Like, he was so easy. He didn't cry. He was just a good baby. Um, but anyway, so there wasn't anything like huge that happened during that pregnancy that I thought like, oh, this might not be the case next time. Now, granted, my sister at the time was going through trying to get pregnant, and she had been trying for 2 years. She was on medication to get pregnant. She finally did get pregnant, actually, during my pregnancy, and now our kids are only 11 weeks apart, which is awesome. But that's beside the point. There was nothing during that pregnancy, though, that really gave me a clue into, like, the future being hard with my pregnancies. Besides just going into early labor, which can be somewhat common for a lot of people. But after we had Alex, we discovered I had something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, where you get ovarian cysts very frequently. Like, I was getting them every single month, to where I was having to have surgery on them a lot of times. And your hormones are wacky, so sometimes it's hard to get pregnant. I didn't have such a hard time getting pregnant, but it was staying pregnant. So I we found out that I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then shortly after that, we found out I had something called a bicornuate uterus. So most people's uteruses are shaped as an oval. Mine is like almost like a figure eight, where I almost have two uteruses. But they connect just in the middle, but the baby really could only be on one side of my uterus. And why we didn't figure that out with Alex, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. That is kind of I'm not sure. But we didn't. So um we figured that out. So when I got pregnant again, Alex was only like 10 months old or something when I got pregnant. And again, we were happy. It was early. We weren't doing anything to prevent it. We weren't doing anything to like plan it. But it happened, and that pregnancy is kind of when I learned all of that, because we lost that pregnancy, and that was really, really hard on me. Um, it was early on, and but that doesn't necessarily make it easier. I mean, in a way it does, but in a way it doesn't. But we lost that pregnancy, and it was tough. It was really tough. But our doctors are like, oh, it happens. People, lose pregnancies all the time. Doesn't mean that you can't have kids. Doesn't mean, it doesn't mean anything. So we're like, okay, we kind of went along with that. But knowing that in the back of my head, like, we were told I might not ever be able to have kids, like, because of these conditions. Well, I already had my son, so I kind of proved that wrong. But anyway, so then we kind of went on. Ended up getting pregnant not that much later. Like, I don't remember how long it was, to be honest with you right now. I think, so he was 10 months during the first one, and then he was 16 months during the next one. So it was about 6 months later. I got pregnant, and I found out I was pregnant when I was in Oregon, staying with my best friend, and I was there for my cousin's wedding. During that time, I started having cramping and some bleeding, and so we went to the hospital, and to figure out what was going on, and they're like, we don't know, like, you look to be fine, like, your levels are good, like, I don't know what's going on. So we thought, okay, well, maybe it's just because of my conditions, maybe I'm just having some issues. So we went along with, the whole time being there, and when we got home, though, like, the pain got worse and worse. And ended up going finally into my doctor and telling her, like, how bad that pain was. And she's like, well, we're going to do some blood work. We're going to do some tests. And found out that I had an ectopic pregnancy, which is when the baby implants into the tube, the fallopian tubes, rather than the uterus. The baby cannot survive there, and if it grows much, it can rupture and you can die. So I went into emergency surgery to go in, and ended up having to lose that tube through that surgery. Was a hard surgery because I not only had just lost a baby, but then I had surgery, so it was like a mental thing and a physical thing. So I was like, trying to heal from both of those things, and it was really, really hard. But again, it happens, those things happen. So I didn't, again, let it, like, stop me from thinking, like, that I can have kids. I just didn't let it. So after that, not long later, we got pregnant again. That time, Alex was 2 years old, or he was almost 2. And I was like, you know what? I'm not telling everybody this time. Like, I'll tell my mom, like, and I'll tell my grandma, but I'm not going to tell everybody until we get to 12 weeks. Well, my son had been, he was going to be turning 2 when we hit 12 weeks. So my doctor, being a family friend, told me she would do an ultrasound for me. And we were going to put it on a shirt and say, like, I'm a big brother at his 2-year-old party. And we were super excited. We had made it to the 12-week point. The 12-week point is kind of where they say it's like the safe zone, where having a miscarriage is really unlikely. So we went in for that ultrasound and found out that the baby had no heartbeat, and that it wasn't it wasn't alive anymore. And that killed me. I mean, it was the third time happening. It was just, it killed me. And it was at 12 weeks. So I'm going into that so excited, so relieved that we had made it, to that point. And then it wasn't there. And that was probably the worst one that I have had. And especially up until that point. I didn't understand. I was confused. I started thinking, I'm never going to have another kid. And then it was also my son's birthday that week. And so it was just like this whole thing. And my body never got rid of it itself. So I ended up having to have surgery one day before my son's birthday. And so I had to have the surgery to go in and, remove everything that was in there. Which again made it to where I had a mental and physical pain to go through and heal from. And each time it got harder and harder and harder. And we went through 3 more. I had 6 in total. And I got to kind of a point where I was done. I wasn't having any more kids. I didn't want to go through it anymore. And we had had a yard sale. I sold everything. I was done. I mean, I was done. And then a week later, I got pregnant. And that pregnancy, I have to be honest, I was pissed off. I got up that morning. I was like, I should be starting. I was one of those people, I'm regular to the hour. I know when I'm supposed to start my period, and I am regular, very regular. And I didn't. And I'm like, something's not right. I'm going to just take a test just to see. And I was pregnant, and I was actually pissed off. I went into the bedroom, and I told my husband, I was like, I'm pregnant. I have to go to the doctor. I'll be back later. So I left, went to get blood work, all that stuff done, because I was convinced already. Doesn't matter that I'm pregnant, because I'm not going to keep this pregnancy anyways. It doesn't matter. Blood work all came back normal, all that stuff, but I still was like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. My husband really felt like this was it. And I was like, don't say that. Don't say that. I was mad at him. I was just mad. Literally, I was just mad at everything at that point. I was like, God, why would you do this again? I don't understand. I don't. A week after I found out I was pregnant, I started having some cramping and some bleeding. And I was like, I told you. I knew this was going to happen. We brought my son to my mother-in-law's. We went to the hospital. We went into the hospital. They did tests and said, yes, you are having a miscarriage. We are sorry. I've heard it all before. So, but even though, I was pissed off during that pregnancy, even though I was like, it's not going to keep, I still was heartbroken. Because there was still that little piece of me that was like, what if, I was, when me and my husband got married, we were like, oh, we wanted 5 kids. I've always wanted a lot of kids. I've always wanted a big family. My major is child development. I love kids, but at this point it was maybe we will be adopting. I don't know. But anyways, we picked up my son. We went home. I think I slept with my son for I don't know, a week or something. But anyways, my husband kept telling me that he said the baby was fine. And I'm like, why would you say that? The doctor has already said that we've miscarried this child. Why are you... I was so mad at him. I was so mad at him for saying that. So mad. Sorry. Okay, so... I had never fully, again, my body wasn't getting rid of it. So I'm like, I'm going to have another surgery. So we call the doctor. We go into the doctor. And she's like, okay, well, we're going to do some blood work. She did blood work. She was like, you're still pregnant. And I'm like, what? No, a week ago. They told me we lost it at the hospital. She's like, well, your blood work is showing. Let's do an ultrasound. So she sends me to do the ultrasound. Actually, no, she did it herself that time. She did it herself. Keep in mind, though, my doctor, I was her nanny for 2 years for her kids. And I was still doing part-time nannying for her at this point. So it was personal for her, like we were friends. So she did the ultrasound that time, and she was like, one of the babies survived. And we're like, what? She's like, most likely you had twins, and one did not make it, and one did. And we were like, excuse me, like, no, what? Like, and my husband was like, I told you that he's like, I just knew. He just knew. He kept telling me that, like, the baby had survived. And I was just, again, like I said, I was really mad at him for that. But then we were just so blown away that she had a little heartbeat, and her heartbeat was strong. My blood work was good, and I was just kind of in shock, I think, though, too, like, because I had already, like, grieved that week. Yeah, like, I was not expecting that. It was a whole whirlwind of emotions. Like, I was just in shock. But yet, I still did not allow myself to attach myself to that baby in the way that I would have otherwise. Now, granted, you cannot help but somewhat be attached. Like, you just can't. It's growing inside of you. I started feeling it. I obviously, my stomach started getting bigger. And then I hit 18 weeks. And 18 weeks, I went into labor. Now, granted, 18 weeks is only 4 months. You cannot have a baby at 4 months and have it survive. Like, you just can't. So I went into labor. We went to the hospital. Granted, they were able to stop that labor. I was on medications. I was on bed rest for that pregnancy. Now, my husband had gotten hurt. And that's a whole nother thing. He had gotten really hurt at work before this and was actually on, like, part-time at work. He was only working half days. And so it was really helpful because I had a 3-year-old at home. Like, well, he was two at that time. He was almost 3. And so he was able to stay home and really help me. And with him, and then when I finally hit 28 weeks is when I kind of started allowing myself to believe, like, that this baby was going to make it. We never even found out the gender. Now, we had to have an ultrasound twice a week, you guys. Now, everybody's like, oh, I wish I could have that. No, you don't. Now, is it fun to see the baby? Sure it is. But is it fun to lay there for an hour twice a week on that table when you're pregnant? It is not fun. And I have back and hip issues. No, not fun. But I did. And then I had to do what they call non-stress tests twice a week as well. So, and then that winter we happened to get, like, a huge snowstorm. We had, like, 2 feet of snow. I don't know. Anyways, I remember calling my doctor and being like, I think I'm going to have to not come this time. Like, they're up on this hill too. And she's like, you have to come. Like, you have to come. And I'm like, you don't understand. Like, coming is going to put me into labor. Like, I don't want to do it. No, you have to. So we did. My papa actually drove me because he had a 4-wheel drive truck. And so he drove me and everything was fine. But when we finally, so early on too, they had the ultrasound tech was like, by the way, she's breech right now, but she's got plenty of room to turn. Oh, she'll turn by then. And I'm like, no, she won't. No, she won't. I wasn't saying she at this point because I didn't know that. But anyways, we get, like, later and they're like, yeah, she's still upside down. I'm like, I know. I just knew she didn't have room. And they would not try to turn her because of my shape of my uterus. So it would have been too high risk for me and for her to try to manipulate turning her, because they can do that sometimes. And she had no room to turn on her own, so I had to have a C-section. We ended up having to have that C-section early because I went into labor. And when she was born and they said that it was a girl, my husband said I repeated it maybe 20 times because I was like, it's a girl. It's a girl. Because the entire time I knew this was my last pregnancy. Like, I knew it was my last pregnancy. My doctor already told me, you can't do this again. And I wanted to have a girl. Like, I wanted a girl so bad. But everybody kept telling me it was a boy because of the way I was carrying, because of the heart rate, all of that. I had convinced myself that this was a boy. Convinced myself, because then I wouldn't be as upset when it was a boy. Like, I would be used to it. I would know, yep, it's a boy, so that's cool. So when I found out it was a girl, it was pretty shocking. And I had a hard time believing it, but I was so happy. I knew this was again going to be my last. I actually during my C-section had to have my tubes tied because it was too risky to have a possible another pregnancy. So I had my tubes tied, and her afterbirth was a whole kind of other story, but which another day, another time, another place. But the whole point of me telling you this, my story, all of this, is that it is hard to go through miscarriages. It kind of kills a piece of you each time. And being that it's your body, you wonder, is it my fault? Did I do something? Like, and you kind of go through all of those things. And you didn't. It's not your fault. Like, it's just, sometimes you just can't. It's just not right. But I've told people this that have had like 3-4 miscarriages and been told like you might not be able to ever have a baby. And of course, granted, guys, I was told that in the beginning, like, you probably won't be able to have kids. And now I have 2 healthy, happy kids, and I have one of each, and I am so blessed, and I'm so thankful for them. Granted, they drive me crazy sometimes. That happens when you have a 13 and a 10-year-old. But I love them so much, and I'm so blessed to have them. And so the whole point of this is to hopefully give some kind of hope, reassurance, encouragement that if you're trying to have a baby and it's not happening for you, doesn't mean that it can't. If you're having miscarriage after miscarriage and it feels like you are never going to be able to carry a baby, it doesn't mean that it can't. And so remember that. Between my 2, I had lost 6, and then I still was able to have, my daughter. And again, I try not to be too serious on my channel. I try to keep it pretty upbeat, pretty positive. I talk about stuff that's going on in my life, but this is probably the heaviest video that I've made. Now, I have done talks about this. I have talked to people about this. Like, this isn't a new story for me to tell. And it does somewhat get easier each time I tell it. Doesn't mean that now for this whole day I won't be thinking about it, because I probably will. Doesn't mean that when I have a friend that gets pregnant, I am so happy, but there's a piece of me that panics. Through therapy, through getting over all these, I was diagnosed with PTSD, which is not just for people who, are in the services. You could have PTSD for so many things. And anyways, and so, yeah, when I find out somebody is pregnant, I literally panic, and I have to remind myself, nope, this isn't that time. We're not there. We're not, because it kind of puts me back. It brings me back. But if I can help one person out there right now that has maybe gone through anything like this and is losing hope that they can ever have kids or that they'll ever be able to carry a baby, if I can give one person just a little bit of encouragement, then it's worth putting my story out there. I know my channel is pretty much just for crafting. I do some dog stuff. I do talk about stuff. It's a little of this, a little of that, but I just kind of felt like, yeah, I'm hoping if this can help one person, then it's worth putting it out there. So, in that respect, I am glad that I did, because even though it's not easy to talk about it, I don't think it ever will be easy to talk about. Sometimes it's worth talking about things that are hard to help somebody else, to give some encouragement to someone else. So that is kind of what I wanted to talk about this week for my Life Monday. Granted, this isn't something that's going on in my life right now, which is what I usually do on my Life Monday, but this is still my life. This is still something that I do struggle with still, that, I don't think you ever fully heal from that. It just gets easier. And sometimes my kids talk about it, sometimes but in the same sense of like that, what I was saying earlier about, like when you go through something and then later you're like, oh, well, I wouldn't be here. Well, I would not have Maddie if I would have not gone through those. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it would have been a different child. Now, granted, I would have loved them, but I'm saying, like, I can't imagine my life without Maddie. And so, I kind of think about that. Like, with my mom, I wouldn't have been here because she had a miscarriage before me, and my mom's a type 1 diabetic. She was a high-risk pregnancy. Like, she wouldn't have had more than 2. I wouldn't be here. So, sometimes when it is hard, when I do have those feelings, those emotions, like, I do try to remind myself, Maddie wouldn't be here if I wouldn't have gone through that, if that hadn't been my life. And that has helped me, made me who I am. Yeah, it just has. It's been, I think, made me more understanding, more empathetic, more compassionate to what things go through. Now, I have a lot of health issues, but I tell you, the best decision I ever made was to have a hysterectomy in 2011. Best decision. Best decision. I couldn't have kids anymore anyways, and it freed me from a lot of pain, physical pain, that I was having, and bleeding, and just a bunch of stuff that was going on with my body. And so that did help so much. And I'm really thankful that I made that decision. So if you're struggling with that decision and you're wondering if you should or shouldn't, I tell you, if you can't have kids anyways, or you're not wanting any more kids anyways, best decision ever. Best decision ever. I don't have to deal with all that anymore, which is wonderful. Like, my friends will be like, oh, I can't go swimming today. And I'm like, why? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already and would like to subscribe, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and the bell icon to be notified when I put up a new video.